This will be like a 45-minute talk. I think in quarter two, we need to go to the other one. What topic did I?
Dharma Frequencies.
Dharma Frequencies. That kind of came up, the idea of the Dharma, the truth. The Buddha Dharma is the truth that the Buddha taught. There's all kinds of dharmas. You can use that in a generic sense. It's a Sanskrit word that means law or form or truth. So there's all kinds of ways of looking at that. Relative truth, absolute truth, the Buddha Dharma. And then the reason I have the word frequencies there is because everybody's in a different frequency. And you need to tune in. You probably think I'm going to say tune into others. No, you need to tune into yourself first. You need to see who this is. I'm not saying you don't work with others, but you need to really see who you are. If you have any doubts, keep looking. You have to see who you have to actually see who you are. Because if you use this casually in a sentence with anybody, say, well, you know, a part of me wants to move to Missouri, but the other part of me wants to just stay on the moon. You know, I like it there. It's round. It's away from everybody. You know how we talk to ourselves about that? A part of me wants to go back to school and study this or this. Another part, well, you know, we keep dividing ourselves up. If you know who you are, you won't divide up anything. And you'll no longer make a decision about anything. I'm not saying you won't make some decisions. You'll make a few, but not very many, because you're so clear about what's happening that you can see that this way you would drown, and this way you'll be able to swim. You see it. You're not confused about what is in front of you. If you're saying, a part of me, if you're dividing yourself up, then that's the downside of it. You're dividing yourself up. The up part of it is if you hear yourself doing that, then you can see that you're deceiving yourself on some level, hiding out from something. So if you understand who this is, if you have doubts about it, you don't know. I'm not saying you don't have negative emotions or have some up days and some down days. I'm not saying that. I'm not saying you're some kind of a perfectly enlightened being who never has any problems. Enlightenment could mean a lot more difficulty than you think it is. So we train our minds to see clearly. This is why we have something like shikantaza. That's why we have zazen or sitting meditation. Sit down and watch what moves. If you hold very, very still and you watch what moves, this actually allows you to look more closely in a more focused and detailed way, and to see what kind of frequencies are actually happening in your brain pan, in your mind, in your awareness. It's so sensitive. Our minds are so extremely sensitive to everything, way more sensitive than you think they are. Or let's put it this way, 150 million times more sensitive than you think they are. How's that? So that helps. That means that this is how much of your world you're seeing. You're seeing this concept, this opinion, that one, this one, and then what you were taught, what somebody taught you that about what you were taught that was wrong. You should have been taught this, should have been taught that. Opinions, ideas. We're constantly juggling. And so I'm not saying that any of that is wrong. I'm not into the right and wrong stuff so much. I'm not saying some things aren't very, very pleasurable and some things are very, very painful. I'm not getting rid of duality altogether. I'm just saying that one gets its meaning from the other. Gets its meaning. It gets it's not. So frequencies, if you find out who this is, then you have a better idea of seeing who everyone else is and what they're doing. And when they come to you for whatever, for friendship, for help, for just to maybe tell you their story, and so they can share what's going on with them. If you know who this is, you will have a really good idea how to relate to that person so that you're respectful to them, and so that you don't meddle with them without their permission. Very, very important to mind your own business. Even when it comes to an 8-year-old, mind your own business. If you do that, then you'll know exactly how much to fool around with what's happening with them. It might be quite a bit. You might have to actually come in and say, knock that off. That'll be the end of that. I've told you 3 times not to do that. Stop it. Don't do it anymore. No explanation. And no, I'm not teaching you how to raise children. I'm just saying that you have to be really clear about that. If you're unclear, don't do anything. But the more we can function out of awareness about things, about whatever it may be, the more sane we will be and our world will be. It's a big project. Like what did I say, 150 million? It's a big project. Just start where you are, as it says in the cover of a children's book. Start where you are. So one of the ways you can train yourself to see more clearly what's happening with you in your mind as you leave this temple, monastery, and go off wherever you go. Go to the store, go to the Walgreens, go interact with other people in another environment. The more you're clear about what was going on in this environment, the more clear you will be when you enter other environments. So that's why we have these forms. That's why we have these forms. Did I say that already? That's why we have these forms. Said it again. That's why we have these forms. Repetition, 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 repetition. Find something to repeat and do it. Repeat it. So that the form itself will be something that the thinking mind and that part of the mind that keeps grasping at this and shoving this away, passion and aggression, and shutting down or ignoring, that part begins to be clarified. And that clarity that arises may arise as boredom. It may arise as the negative aspect of boredom is boring, not entertaining. The positive part of boredom is you're actually weaning yourself away from entertainment, from the incessant need to be filled up with some damn thing. Something's got to happen. I need this, I've got to have that. Anything from a news program to movies. And I'm not saying that you should not watch movies. This is always about awareness. It's never about what you do so much. It's about awareness of what you do. That actual space around, like I talked about in the meditation instruction. Excuse me. Fish in a pond. Your thoughts are none of your business. And of course, they're your thoughts, but I'm just saying, if you could take that attitude towards them, you would have a lot more space around them instead of going in and rejecting this, and I don't want to think that anymore, or I need to think more of this and more of this. And again, coming back around full circle, I'm not saying your thoughts are wrong or you should not think. Awareness, awareness. So if you understand the chemistry of your own situation, the frequency, to use the word I used Dharma Frequencies. If you tune into what's happening with you, then you can tune in more to what is happening out in the world or to others, or when you're talking to someone. Not much. If you can do that, then when you actually sit in front of someone, you can see who they are. Not in terms of some kind of story about them or opinion about them, but you can just be with them. And then if there's any possibility of helping them, or if there's any possibility that they may help you, there's enough openness there for that to transpire. There's a technique that I've taught sometimes called halfway measures, and I can do it with the sticks. And that is, anytime you're going to do anything, okay, I'm going to strike these sticks together. So I'm going to strike them and stop. You might not want to do this out in public too much, and what would people think? They might think you're crazy. So, but halfway, find something that has a beginning and end and cut it in half, and see, and bring your consciousness into the halfway measure. Into the halfway measure. You can do this, once you get the idea of this, click. Once you get the idea of that, then you don't have to do the exercise, because then your life becomes an exercise. When you go to pick something up, you don't necessarily stop halfway, because you've practiced that a little bit. You actually have an idea. Once you have an idea what that is, then you flash on the halfway point between things. You're reaching for something. Very interesting thing about that, when you flash on that halfway point, it includes everything. Then you have a complete picture of whatever you're doing. An amazing sense of presence begins to happen. And this begins to starve the mind that keeps supporting an ego. This begins to put the ego mind, you could say, on a diet, so that you aren't constantly thinking about yourself, and who you are, and how you're doing, and what people think about you, what people think about what you're thinking about, what they, on and on and on. Get it, stay in your body, be here, be present. When you walk from one room to another, reflect on the halfway point. When you're going from the parking lot to the building, any place in your life, look at that. Look at that. Look at what is happening in all those areas. Because here's what happens. Just a moment, please. Here's what happens: is you get up to go somewhere, and then you face out. You go, and you're on your way somewhere. I'm not going to leave. You go somewhere, and then you come back, and you're still thinking in your mind. Maybe you forget to bow to the altar. Oops. Forms. What's wrong with that picture? When I say wrong, I don't mean with a capital W. I mean with a capital R. Yes.
You weren't mindful?
That's a pretty good way of saying it. Yeah, I was, of course I'm acting, because normally I'm extreme. All kinds of them. Like, what do you mean? I look at the words you're using. I look at the spaces between the words. The spaces and I think this went off. The spaces and the words themselves are important. Words are important, but don't neglect the tone of the voice, the spaces, all the other nuances that are happening there. And also, the basic thing I was pointing out here is I'll be back. So halfway, you're here. Now you're right here. Now you're here. Now you're here. Completely wherever you're at. You see this door. You see this texture here. You look at this. You see your hand going down towards the handle. You actually see it. I'm not talking about being, nuts. I'm just talking about you're already here. Your eyes are here. You don't have to go and say, oh my God, I forgot to take my eyes with me. No, that's to depend on hearing. Jay would have something to say about that. But anyway, then when you come, just notice things. All you have to do is notice them. When you open the door, notice all the noises that are with that door. And you go out and you come back. It's as if this was your whole life closing that door. Your whole life is about closing a door. And when you do it quietly, you'll notice that you never can do it quietly. Every door, that door is fairly well oiled. But if, probably anybody that sits here, but if Chazon is sitting in the Doan seat, and probably Shoka or other people that would sit there, they know who's coming through that door just by the sound. Everybody's body moves differently. Everybody turns that handle. Some people just open it and close it. It just slams. Is that wrong? Is that wrong? Is that wrong to slam the door?
Yes.
Did you miss me? So the idea with the door closing, it's a practice. It's not, people go in and out this door all the time. We've never caught somebody and say, please don't slam the temple door. We won't say that. Why? Respect. Allow people to practice. Allow people to be in their body mind and let the form do its job. If you do it too fast, you actually miss the frequency of the person that you're endeavoring to help, whose practice or awareness you're endeavoring to create a situation that's very strong. So when you go up in and out that door, you make as little sound as possible. And then, in a certain sense, if they're a practitioner and they're here and they're endeavoring to practice, they need to see that themselves. It's called awareness. On the other hand, here I am telling you about it. Yes, sir.
Isn't it closing the door quietly also about respect?
Yeah.
How will a person who isn't being respectful about that going to know?
Say more.
I mean, if we're respectful to them and we don't say anything to them about it, how would they know?
Maybe we should say something. Not always so. It's not always so. There's no, in this particular, in a non-theistic tradition, no rules. Forms, and some of them are very, very strong. Even our 16 precepts are to be observed, not to follow. You might say, well, don't you follow the precept of not to kill? No, you observe it. Because if you follow it, you'll harm beings. If you follow, as they say, the letter of the law, you will actually hurt beings by your lack of awareness. Because when you follow a form, you glue yourself to a form and try to do it rightly or correctly, then you're ignoring everything else. And then you're following what I'm saying, you could actually say, well, aren't you ignoring everything else when you're closing the door quietly? I don't have no takers.
Aren't you ignoring everything else when you closing the door quietly?
No.
Why not?
Because you're aware you're doing that. Because if your awareness is actually there, you've included the whole universe in that. It's called moon in a dewdrop. Look at a dewdrop and see the moon reflected there. Of course, you have to polish the doorknob a lot.
So if you close the door quietly because the rule is to do that, are you ignoring everything else?
Could be, yeah. It could be. There's more of a chance that you'll say, well, I got that handled. And so then you always do it quietly by a rule. Excuse me. Then your mind tends to go off in tangents and you daydream. And not that daydreaming is wrong. It's just that it takes a lot of awareness to daydream. So it's a practice. It's not a performance. As I sometimes say, it's not a performance. You can't go through a door without making some noise. But the idea would be to use that as part of your practice. To go out the door, to walk quietly, especially in a zendo. If you're in the kitchen, and we don't have in this temple we don't have a functional speech or noble silence or any of those practices, because I followed those for close to 30 years, and I saw what that was, and so now we don't do that. It's too tight of a rule. The rule is too tight and doesn't fundamentally help people's awareness. Questions?
You said it takes a lot of awareness to daydream.
Yes.
Could you say more about that?
I'm saying if you're walking from here to the door and you're kind of speculating on where you're going and where you've been and what you're going to do next, and you're daydreaming, then your awareness is it's like a little vacuum cleaner. It's sucking all your awareness up into and so you don't even know about the doorknob. It's like driving to the stop and go. You know where it's at. You've been there many times. So every time you go there, you daydream the whole way there. You have just enough awareness to see taillights go on ahead of you, so you put on the brake, and just enough awareness to see. But most of your awareness is sucked up into analyzing, judging people, judging other drivers, judging yourself. Just a constant thing. Again, this is very important. Not wrong. We're not doing right and wrong. It's not helpful to do that, at least in this tradition. I'm not saying that there aren't other spiritual paths that's the way they practice, and they should do it. We're not correcting them either. So they need to do whatever they need to do. Whatever helps bring people together to help one another is probably a good thing. Whatever the heading is, or the leading idea is there. More.
How could we observe halfway points during sitting meditation?
I think it comes up probably more. One of the things you can do is you can notice when you're halfway to the cushion. You can notice when you're sitting on the cushion, when you're halfway between moving around and adjusting and looking at the wall. And then you can begin to look at the wall, and you can notice how you can't look at the wall. How your mind keeps wandering away, going somewhere else, and then there's the wall, and some meditation teachings train you to keep coming back to the wall, and that can be valid. But I think that should be your business. I think you as a meditator need to realize that your mind is wandering, and then you come back rather than just come back too quick. First, you need to really get a good experience of daydreaming, mind going all over the place, doing this, running here, running there, building tree huts, or whatever you're doing in your mind, remembering things in the past, worrying about things in the future. And then at some point you come back, and there might be some thoughts like, all I'm doing is just sitting here fantasizing, and so on. So it's always about awareness, never about necessarily, the way I teach this, it's not about trying to make your mind stay here and be mindful. I don't teach mindfulness practice. I teach awareness. And so that's why I'm so great.
What you just said, when you said, oh, I'm just sitting here fantasizing, is that in itself a halfway point?
It can be, because you've actually, you've had the sitting down, you've had the fantasy, and then something happened in the middle of that. So it could be, but you could also create them artificially, like taking something that's very simple, like you're eating soup and you stop halfway. be careful you don't spill any. If you actually stopping halfway, if you do that a few times, then you can start to bring awareness in lots of other activities. And you just notice the halfway. You don't have to stop there. You just notice it. And that tends to kind of flash out so you see the entire situation more clearly. And so in this way, you're tuning into who you are. You're watching yourself really closely without being critical. Yeah, it's easy to watch yourself really closely and think, oh, I'm thinking too much. I'm not saying that. You can't. I'm not saying you shouldn't think or that you should be a certain way. Or I'm only talking about awareness. And when that is happening, then when other people come to you, you see the frequencies of other people. You see them so clearly that you really know, without even thinking about it particularly, whether this person wants your help. They might be asking you for help, and you might see so clearly what they're actually doing that you don't buy it, because you're able to tune into that. And you can see that they just want to be a person who asks for help. We all know people like this. They're always doing that, but they don't really want it. Or you might see a person's asking for help, and they want the help. They really want the help, but they only want it in a certain way. They don't. You might be clear in an area where this is probably the kind of help that would be more helpful here, but they're not ready for that. They only want this other kind. Should I keep going, or is there a question? Is this kind of halfway? Where are we? Is there some understanding of what I'm saying about if you're clear about this,
Yes.
then you can see there's no way I can help this person. Whereas someone else you might see is not even asking for help, but because you can see it so clearly, you actually there's an opening where you could go and say, is there something I can do to help you? And then they may, because they may be full of ideas about, well, you're too busy, or, you're too this, and you can see it. So there's probably 150 million other examples of that same thing. Yes, sir.
I have a question about the Maitri Bhavana.
Okay.
Just,
Mindful about it.
one of the lines reads, how do you cultivate, my question is, how do you cultivate a boundless goodwill towards the entire world?
Well, there are ways, we're going to talk about that a little bit in the talk at noon, which is half an hour away. It's trying to get yourself or cultivate that is difficult. There are practices that we do that we just by repeating that, just by saying that and taking the thinking process and saying that over and over, so you can make an affirmation to yourself to do that. I think it's very, very individual how you would do that, rather than everybody needs to practice it the same way. One of the ways, this is one of them, is you can see the way in which you're stingy. Actually see the way in which you're holding back from actually helping people. If you really are helping people, you probably won't know it. I mean, there'll be that much generosity is happening. You've so much understood what generosity is that you realize that you don't own anything. So therefore, you're not grasping at anything. You also realize that you own everything. So therefore, why hang on to anything? It's all yours. Somebody else just happens to have it for a while. It might sound kind of silly, but there's something about that once you understand what that is, then your capacity to be boundless, you can see how, on the one hand, how limited that is, and yet you can see what your job is, if you want to use that word, is you just do what you can. You just do the best you can. But there's a definite change or definite something that happens where you start putting others before yourself. And you don't necessarily do that in a way that they You're not just at someone's beck and call. You're going to do whatever they want. So you don't go overboard the other direction where you're a martyr or something. More.
How do halfway measures help with that boundless goodwill?
Well, fundamentally, I feel that it is because it's an awareness practice, because you're actually taking something that you can't locate and you're stretching it. You're stretching the awareness. Would be a way that I would talk about it. You're stretching the awareness so that at some point or points, or maybe there's no points, I don't know, but you're stretching it so much. You're so open. You no longer live in a broom closet. You've knocked down the doors, or somebody's helped you remove them, or you just see that there never were any doors. There never were any walls. As it says in the Heart Sutra, without walls of the mind. The walls of the mind of the self-centeredness has just started to dissolve. You realize that everywhere you look, there's some aspect of your own mind, your own consciousness. So the boundlessness you start to see this isn't something you create, like an individual, you make stuff. It's something you understand, or you realize, or you're aware that yourself is very, very tiny, and the world is very, very vast. The universe. So it's boundless. More.
Can that show up as suffering, feeling very, very vast?
Yeah, it will. When the mind opens up and the awareness starts to expand without any expander, no one behind it, then you see the vastness, you see the goodness of everything, and you see the suffering. The world is suffering. There's an intense suffering going on all over the place, and I'm not laughing because of the suffering. I'm just saying that it's so obvious everywhere. But most people are shut down on it, and if they shut down on the suffering, it's all over, and they're just concerned with their own suffering. More.
How can you respond to that?
I don't know, find out. I think it's uniquely individual. We're right back to frequencies again. You know, find the frequency that is yours. You and I've talked about this a lot. Find what that is, and then function in that area. And then you'll be able to see what's happening with everyone else. It's quite a discovery to see that you've, and this happens with everyone at some level, but to see that what you thought somebody was doing was completely wrong. Or saying that you actually projected what you thought onto them, and you thought that was them, but that actually was you. You're the one that had the thought about them. In other words, you made up stuff. And the making up stuff comes from fear, or from losing control, or from not knowing, not having. If the awareness is, if the awareness rules, then you won't mind not knowing. You might, someone would look at you a certain, or act a certain way, or do this or do that. You won't necessarily mind not knowing what's going on for a while. Sometimes called patience. Space. Question? Think of something.
Yeah, it's a little off topic, but
I don't care.
it's something you said earlier this week, that love is a long way from compassion. It's something I've been contemplating all week, and I was wondering if you could say a little bit more about what you mean when you say love is a long way from compassion.
I said that?
You did.
I guess I'm gonna have to talk about it. So love, we'll talk about that in the next talk a little bit, which is the topic is karuna, or compassion. But I could say that the compassion is, the term passion is feeling, emotion, and compassion is to feel with to actually feel with that, to actually feel someone. Sometimes we experience it when someone is crying. Maybe we're feeling fine, but someone else is crying, and we resonate frequencies again with that person. We start to tear up ourselves. We might not even know what's wrong, but we feel that compassion. So that you could say that's the more obvious kind, that this frequency is happening. But if that happens all the time, eventually the frequency is there, and the feeling is there, and the resonance is there, and eventually you're always tuned into it. So you may not cry all the time, or it might come and go. And so the conventional sense of love is more that you love this more than that, and it's more selective about who you love and again, not correcting anything. So it's that more of a grasping kind of thing, and it could be very sweet and good. But compassion is actual compassion will probably go unnoticed, because people are so wrapped up in themselves, they don't realize how much when someone cares for someone, ultimately, when the caring is so ultimate.
Is there, what about like kindness? Does that go unnoticed? I'm thinking about, you can't artificially create compassion, but you can make an effort to be nice to somebody because it's helpful to the situation. What is that?
It's relative truth. That's why we do relative bodhicitta. That's why we do Tonglen practice. Some of us do. That's why we do Maitri Bhavana. It's it's relative, but we just do the best we can. We come and we bow to an altar. We try to, and sometimes people look at us and think we're bowing to some guy. Somebody carved something out of wood and put some kind of a deity, but it functions a little bit like that. But you're really bowing to your own Buddha nature. You're really bowing to your own enlightenment, which is not separate from anyone. Everyone has that. They just don't know it. So yes.
A question from Maggie.
Maggie.
She asks, is there ever an end to that intense suffering?
I can say it this way, Maggie, that your desire for suffering to come to an end is the second noble truth. The first one is life is suffering. The cause is wanting it to not be there. And the path, the cessation of that is awareness that sees through what I'm going to be talking about pretty soon, passion, aggression, and ignorance, and sees that. That brings about the cessation, which is the third one. The fourth one is the path, I think, isn't it? Yes.
In the meditation instruction this morning, you were using the image of the fish in the pond and mind like water.
Mm-hmm.
And I think you said a line like, everything is welcome.
Yeah.
How do we make everything welcome?
Just by not fighting with anything. Whatever comes to your door. I'm not saying that if somebody comes to your door, literally comes to your door and hammers on the door and tries to make you let them in. I'm not saying you should let them in. It's not the relative kind of thing of completely making yourself a martyr or being so overwhelmingly. That's actually a kind of a reverse form of egocentrism to do that. It's very subtle. It's actually an enemy of compassion. You should ask more if you have more.
What about the times when you don't feel like welcoming everything?
Don't do it. It's never about what you do. If the awareness is there, if the awareness is powerful, sometimes you'll shut the door and sometimes you'll open it. Sometimes you give money to somebody with a cardboard sign and sometimes you don't. Don't make a rule. Don't make, what does it say in the sutras? Don't make up forms. Isn't that what it says?
Don't set up standards.
Don't set up standards, thanks. Don't set up a standard and then make that it. Everything is flowing fluctuating all the time and moving and moving. Our minds are like that. Sit down and look at your mind for an hour. You want to see what fluctuates. You want to see what a lot of fish all over the place. Question?
It's time
Time for what?
to dedicate the minute.
Okay. I had to look out there to see what I should do next.
Well, I had a question.
You have a question? What is it? Go ahead.
I do have, but it's time for.
Well, it's still running. Go ahead.
How can you be clear about this
Clear about this.
if this is discontinuous?
That is the clarity. Stop worrying about the discontinuity. You're trying to find a self that's real. There isn't one. It's just not objecting to the discontinuity anymore. That's the only continuity you'll probably ever get.
Is that a basis for relating to somebody else
course.
in their discontinuity?
Of course.
The dedication of merit is in the back of your yellow checkbox. And don't forget our donation boxes in the hallway.
Merit is penetrate into all places so that we and every sentient being together can realize the Buddha's way. Jiho san shi shihu shi son bu sa moko sa SokukoJi. The 10 directions, the 3 worlds, all Buddhas, all venerable ones, Bodhisattvas, Mahasattvas, the great Prajna Paramita,